I've made many mistakes in my life. And one of the kinds of mistakes that I keep making over and over is that I get obsessed about questions that other people don't seem to care about, or at least they don't care about it as much as I do. And this is an example of one of those questions. How should money be created? I got interested in this question because I asked a bunch of other questions before that. First, I asked the question, how is money created? Which is somehow quite difficult to answer. And also the question, why is money created? And why do we have this system for creating money? And I made a couple of YouTube videos about those topics before these videos. But then I got to the question that I want to discuss today, which is how should money be created? And I came up with a new system for creating money that I think is just easier to understand, much more simple and principled than our existing system. And that's what I want to explain in this video. Now, I wrote a paper about this topic. You can find the link to the paper in the description of this video. So if you want more details, you can look there. So first, let me start with the fact that money is being created. Here's a picture of all of the US dollars held in deposits at US banks. And you can see the data goes as far back as right before 1960. And you can see that there's just a steady increase in the amount of money held in these bank accounts. And if you think about this, at first, maybe this is a bit mysterious because almost everything we do does not create money. When one person pays money to someone else, the money just moves from one place to another. So where is this money coming from? Okay, and I will briefly explain where it's coming from. Why is this question important? Well, it's important because our entire system is built on the concept of money and prices for items. And if the price of a particular item or service goes up, there could be a number of explanations for this. It could be that the supply of the item has gone down. It could be that the demand for the item has gone up. And those are usually the explanations that we focus on. But there is a third possibility, which is very troubling, which is that it could be that the supply of money has gone up. And that's not an explanation that people are used to, and that's not how we think about prices. So this third possibility is a problem. If that's the reason why prices are going up or down, then that's a failure of our system for creating money. Okay, so as far as possible, we'd like the supply of money to be regulated in a way that does not interfere with prices. Okay. And that is what is meant by saying that money should be elastic. We'd like the supply of money to adapt to the demand for money in such a way that prices reflect the value of the items and communicate demand and supply properly. And our system for the US dollar is meant to be elastic. The goal is to make it elastic. It's unclear whether it has the correct level of elasticity. But it's a very old system. It's been evolving for more than 200 years, and the system is actually constantly changing. The US dollar today is not the same as it was 50 years ago. And it can be pretty hard to understand all of the details of that system. In contrast, these days we have cryptocurrencies, which started with the invention of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a radically new way to do money, and it is completely inelastic. It was designed to be inelastic. And then there are sort of these currencies that are somewhat in between. There are currencies that are cryptocurrencies, but somehow pegged to the dollar or other fiat currencies. And these currencies are elastic, but they inherit their elasticity from the dollar. Okay. Now, of course, the US dollar is not the only currency out there. There's many other countries with their own currencies. But actually, once you understand their financial system, you'll see that everything is sort of pegged to the dollar. Okay, everything in the world today has to respond to what happens with the US dollar. I'm not going to discuss the details of that, but it's true. Okay, so let's start by discussing briefly how money is currently created. The short explanation is that money is created when banks make loans. It's not created by the process of making loans in general, but it is created when banks make loans. Banks have a special role in the creation of money. So if somebody goes to a bank and says they want a loan, the way this works today is that the bank simply gives them the loan by increasing the amount of deposits at the bank. So the bank makes an account with the loaned amount of money in the deposits as a deposit in the account without any corresponding change to the cash held at the bank. Okay, so the amount held in deposits can be different from the amount of actual cash held at the bank. And as more loans are created in this way, the amount of deposits can go up. As these loans are repaid, the amount of deposits go down. Okay. And almost all money in our system is held at banks, right? When you take money out, you hold the money briefly and then put it in another bank account. So you can think of the money as just shuttling back and forth between various banks in the banking system. This is mostly what's happening with money. But the amount in deposits is not the same as the amount held in cash. In the early 1900s, this led to a problem because you could eventually reach the situation, it's inevitable, that someone will try to withdraw money from the bank, but the bank does not have enough money in cash to satisfy this withdrawal. So in 1907, this led to a major panic and a bank run. Everybody demanded their money at the same time, and the bank simply could not provide the cash. Okay. This problem was solved in 1913 by the creation of the current Fed. And it was solved by giving the Fed the power to lend money to the banks in order to prevent bank runs. So if the bank does not have enough cash on hand, the Fed will lend money to the banks, and then the bank will be able to repay the loans. So we have since this ended the problem of bank runs. Okay, but it also legitimized the creation of money in the form of deposits. These deposits were not equivalent to cash before this rule was put in place, before the Fed was allowed to do this. But after that, the deposits really are de facto US dollars. Okay, so a financial instrument in the banking industry became equivalent to US dollars because they can always be exchanged for US dollars. And that's a significant change to the system. So you can actually interpret this picture, the amount of money in deposits, as really a measurement of how the number of outstanding loans in the banking system has grown over time. Okay, it's just gone up, except right now, where the current financial crisis is leading to a drop in the number of deposits held at banks for the first time in a very long time. Okay, so since 1913, the system has been updated a few times to allow for other financial instruments, not just deposits, to become de facto dollars. And at present, there are at least 4 types of financial instruments that can be exchanged for US dollars. I will not go into the details of these other instruments, but here's a picture of those 4 instruments and the quantities of money held in that form. I already talked about deposits. In the 1970s, a new form of financial contract called repo was given the power, was made into a de facto dollar. Maybe the most interesting one here is Eurodollars. So what started happening is that banks in other countries started to issue deposits in US dollars by giving loans in US dollars that were not backed by cash, just like happened in the US. Now, that's not a problem for the US. Those banks are outside the jurisdiction of the US, and the Fed doesn't care about those banks. that led to a run on those foreign banks, which eventually led to a local domestic U.S. bank going under. And when that happened, the Fed felt it had to intervene, and the way it intervened is it said that it would provide loans to foreign central banks to backstop the Eurodollars, the deposits held in foreign banks. And so it legitimized the creation of US dollars at foreign banks, which to me, the first time I heard this, it seemed pretty surprising that happened. All right, so what are the limitations of this system? Well, the entities that create the money in this setup, they have the wrong incentives. What price do they pay if they create too much money or too little money? They're sort of not trying to optimize anything globally. And in particular, if they make mistakes, they know that the central bank, the Fed, will back up their mistakes. So they just have the wrong incentives. A second drawback is that the finance industry, these big players in the finance industry, have first access to the money. You and I cannot go and just get a loan from the Fed, right? But a small list of financial institutions can do that. And is that necessary? Do we really need to give power to those institutions to be able to generate money and have access to the cash provided by the Fed? And finally, a similar problem is that the system is not fully distributed. The idea for the system was to, maybe I should say that the reason we have the system in the first place is that it was considered a negative to have the power to create money concentrated in a government agency. We tried to do that before we had central banks, and that led to a really bad system because politicians were then able to create money. So we tried to distribute the power to create money, and that's how we ended up with this system. So the power to create money is currently distributed, but it's not completely distributed. It's still held by, the power is held by a few financial institutions. And this can lead to lots of problems. For example, you could ask, why are home prices going in our current system just going up? They're constantly going up, up, up. And maybe it's because the supply and demand of homes is moving in a way that indicates that home prices should go up. That could be true. But here's another explanation which sounds credible to me. And that's that our system of creating money has a feedback loop. You see, as home prices go up, that means the collateral for loans to buy homes is going up. The value of the collateral for buying for home loans is going up. So the sizes of home loans is going up and up. Okay, because it has bigger collateral, we can approve bigger loans, and so that leads to larger loans. And because of the way our system is built, that means that there's more money in the system. As there are larger loans, there will be more money, and more money will lead to rising prices. So we have a sort of a feedback loop where more money is created, which causes higher prices, which causes more money to be created. Okay, it just seems like a badly designed system. So next I want to address why we have a system where money is created in the first place. Maybe the solution is that we should just have a fixed amount of money. Well, that's in fact the solution that was adopted by the creator of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was designed to be inelastic. The total supply of Bitcoins in the world is capped at 21 million and can never go above this cap. The creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, discussed some of the intuitions for making Bitcoin elastic in an early post on a forum. Satoshi said, "The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely a fraction in reserve." So here Satoshi is discussing exactly the system that I just described, the US dollar. And the focus here is on the fact that we have to place this unnecessary trust in these financial institutions. And Bitcoin was designed to give a way to have financial transactions of money without any trust. And to do that, Satoshi made Bitcoin inelastic. Okay, so that eliminated the need for the creation of money with the banking system. So what's the problem? What's the problem with Bitcoin? The problem is that if you have a fixed supply of Bitcoin, then that also, or a fixed supply of money in general, that also messes with prices in a strange way. Let's say we have at present there's a certain number of houses and a certain number of people in the world, and a certain amount of Bitcoin. Now over time, as the number of houses and people goes up, this will lead to the price of houses falling down, even if the supply and demand for houses are in equilibrium with each other. Okay, it's just because the number of houses, the number of people trying to buy houses is going up, the amount of Bitcoin is fixed. Another way to think about it is that, you can look at how many transactions involve home sales right now, or say at 2020. And over time, if these transactions go up, then you cannot have the prices of the homes in these transactions stay the same if those prices are denominated in Bitcoin, because the number of Bitcoin does not increase. Right? So if you have a fixed supply of money, as the number of transactions goes up, prices will have to fall. So again, you have prices changing for the wrong reason. Okay. The problem with that is that if prices are generally falling, it encourages people to hoard the money instead of spending it. Okay, and it's generally been viewed in economics as a bad thing if prices are going down. All right, so I've now complained about the way the US dollar does it and the way Bitcoin does it. So how should money be created? So I spent some time thinking about this, and I came up eventually with a solution that I want to describe here. So the solution is called elastic cash. It's a new, completely decentralized mechanism for creating money. And the key idea or one of the key ideas of the system is a new kind of financial contract. It's a contract that I'll call a cash bond. Every cash bond is associated with a date D, and it's issued by the central bank, and it's redeemed for $1 on the date D. On date D, the cash bond expires, and it's replaced with $1. And there will also be a market for cash bonds, where everyone can buy and sell cash bonds. Okay, so the cash bonds themselves will be publicly traded in a market. Moreover, the system will be set up so that cash bonds cannot be exchanged outside of this market. They can only be exchanged between people or entities by buying and selling them in this public market. Finally, cash bonds cannot be used as collateral for loans. So it'll be enforced that under the law that you cannot use cash bonds as collateral for loans, which is consistent with the fact that it cannot be exchanged outside of the market. And moreover, the trade in cash bonds is not taxed. Okay. The purpose of these rules is to make sure that the market for cash bonds remains extremely liquid, and there's a lot of trade going on, and the price of cash bonds behaves really well. Okay, and that's because this market actually plays the role of a computer. Okay, and I'll explain what I mean about that. So first of all, what is the meaning of a cash bond? If you buy a cash bond, it's going to be worth $1 at some future date. So maybe I'd be willing to buy it for 97 cents. This purchase effectively executes a loan. It would be me lending money to the Fed. Okay, so these cash bonds, when you buy them, execute a loan from the buyer to the Fed. Now, the Fed does not need money. The Fed is able to print its own money. Okay, so it might seem strange that we are lending money to the Fed. But the point of this market and the trade in cash bonds is the prices that show up in this market can be used to compute something about the demand for money. Namely, they compute the risk-free rate of interest. You see, because this loan is to the Fed, and the Fed will never default because it can create money to repay the loan, this loan is risk-free. There's no risk of default. So normally when you make a loan to someone, there are many factors that go in. What is the opportunity cost that you're losing by giving your money away for a period of time? What is the chance that they will not be able to repay you? There are all kinds of factors that matter. But these kinds of loans are different because the Fed is guaranteed to repay you. So the rate of interest that corresponds to these loans really captures something about the demand for money. Okay. And the purpose of this market is to somehow compute what the demand for money is in a decentralized way. Okay, so at any point in time, we'll have some number of outstanding cash bonds in the market. Okay. And let's say the current date is D, and then at all future dates, there will be some number of cash bonds that are out there in the market. And these cash bonds are being traded back and forth between everyone, and the Fed is also involved in trading them. Let's write price of D to be the price of cash bond D in the market. Then this price determines an interest rate of T, where if the current date is D0, okay, the current date here is D0, then the interest rate for a loan of length T that's implied by this price is given by this formula. If someone is willing to buy this cash bond D0 plus T at this price, then it's because the interest rate must satisfy this. It's sort of like this is the return that they would get that would imply that the value of the cash bond is 1 when the date shows up. Okay. So you can, from these prices in the market, compute interest rates. So how can we use these interest rates? Well, the intuition for the mechanism that I want to design is that the Fed will create money or destroy money using this market in such a way that the interest rate, the risk-free rate of interest, a particular risk-free rate of interest is held approximately fixed. Okay, so we'll again increase or decrease the supply of money so that a particular interest rate is held approximately fixed. So we'll pick a short duration, let's say 1 week, and the goal will be to regulate the supply of money so the rate for 1 week loans to the Fed is approximately 2%. To do that, we'll calculate two numbers, P plus and P minus. P plus is the price of cash bonds that are 1 week out that corresponds to an interest rate of 1.99%. And P minus is this price that corresponds to an interest rate of 2.01%. And now I will specify exactly how the Fed will interact with this cash bond market. The Fed will follow a few simple rules. The first rule is that it will sell cash bonds at the price P plus in arbitrary quantities. So anytime someone places an order to buy a cash bond at price P plus, the Fed will satisfy that order in the market. The second rule is that the Fed will buy cash bonds at price P minus, and they will buy arbitrary quantities of cash bonds at P minus. Okay, so these two rules might create new cash bonds or remove cash bonds from the market. And the idea here is to keep the interest rate in the market fixed. So money will be either inserted or removed until the interest rate goes in between these two numbers. Okay. Now, these two rules are not enough because at some point, if the Fed buys all of the cash bonds, if there's a huge demand for money, the Fed might eventually buy all outstanding cash bonds that are 1 week out, and then the Fed cannot insert more money. Okay. So we need a third rule, and that third rule will be that if the Fed sees that this has happened, if 95% of the cash bonds that are 1 week out have been already purchased and removed from the market, then the Fed will sell significant quantities of cash bonds that are 2 weeks out at auction. So we'll just auction off a lot of cash bonds that are 2 weeks out. The point of doing this is that people will be incentivized to buy these cash bonds at some price. And if they buy it at that price, they will be able to sell it back to the Fed at the price of P minus in a week. So as people participate in these auctions, the net effect will be that cash bonds will be being sold and then removed from the market a week later. The net effect will be to insert significant quantities of money into the market, into the system. Okay. So the Fed will, the way I imagine this happening is that the Fed will sell these 2 week cash bonds in large quantities, and will keep escalating the amount of sales until we return to the point where the price of the 1 week out cash bonds is between the parameters that we want it to be, between P plus and P minus. Finally, if cash bonds are redeemed for $1, if they expire here, then those cash bonds are replaced by selling new cash bonds at auction, and the Fed should do that to maintain this target distribution on cash bonds that's fixed ahead of time. Okay. So that's it. That's the system for creating money that I want to use. And one observation is that this system has an additional advantage that it can just be implemented with a cryptocurrency. In the framework of cryptocurrencies, you do not need a central authority or a trusted authority in order to implement this mechanism. You can have the distributed algorithm in the cryptocurrency implement all of these rules. Okay. And I'll leave out the details. I discuss some of them in my paper. So what are the advantages of this system? Well, first of all, it's truly decentralized, right? The demand for money is determined by a market that's just open to everyone. So no one has control, no one has undue control over whether or not money should be created. The second feature of the system is that the access to the newly created money is completely fair. There's no special treatment to financial institutions. They acquire money in the same way as everybody else by participating in this market. And the third feature is that we're using the system to compute the demand for money in a principled way, using the risk-free rate of interest. Okay, and this is just a clean way to understand exactly how the demand for money is behaving. And to me, it seems like a vastly better system than what we have in place right now. So I'll stop there, and if you'd like to see more details, please take a look at the paper that's linked off of the description for this video.